Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we look at concern over rising anti-Sikh incidents, with Hindutva extremists likely behind the increase. In the United States, another Indian national is charged with people trafficking, bringing illegal immigrants into California from India. Will this be a topic of conversation of US Vice President Vance and his wife as they in turn visit India later this month? But no doubt they will be talking about India's devious tactics that have maintained the enormous trade imbalance between the two nations. And we'll take a look at just what India has been up to that has Trump and his team fizzing with indignation. All this and more on today's show. But joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thanks for joining us once again. And we've noticed that we've got lots of comments coming in, so thank you very much for that. We love to have you as a part of the show, and by commenting, you become a part of the show. So don't forget to also share. We'd love to see our subscribers jump up, because that helps to support the channel. And back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and I have noticed we hit the milestone of 25,000 subscribers just the other day, so thank you for all your support and welcome to those recent arrivals to the show. But yes, in the show, James and I together will be bringing you, as always, our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world, and we will indeed, at the end of the show, take a look at loads of your great comments which have been filling up below the video, so thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
It has become a big concern of Sikhs around the world, not only here in Surrey, not only in the UK, but elsewhere in the US and other locations. There seems to be a rise in the Hindutva attacks on Sikhs, whether it is online or if it is in person, including in the Sikh Gurdwara here in Surrey recently. There was an individual who decided to act out and play the fool and then try to pretend that he had some kind of a mental health issue to try to cover up his actions. So we'll go to that story now. The visuals here, we just pulled up some of our video footage from our archives for the background on the story. So they don't actually match, but it was just something to give you a bit of a different background and a bit of different look. And hopefully, if you're watching from Edmonton, Vancouver, and elsewhere, you might actually see yourself from some of the events that I've covered. So let's see about that. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Perspectives on Savage TV. I'm James Cousineau in the studios here in Vancouver, British Columbia. At this time, there's rising concerns over anti-Sikh incidents, not only in Surrey but around the globe. A series of troubling incidents has sparked global concern within the Sikh community, raising fears of escalating tensions and targeted attacks. We begin in Surrey, British Columbia, where a disturbing incident unfolded at the Dasmash Darbar Gurdwara this past Sunday, March the 9th. During a religious program, a man disrupted proceedings shouting, "I am a proud Hindu," and attempting to approach the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. He removed his head covering and reportedly shouted Hindutva slogans. Members of the congregation apprehended the man and handed him over to police. The man reportedly feigned mental illness and later claimed he was sent to provoke a reaction. His phone allegedly contained videos of previous anti-Sikh disturbances and evidence of involvement in Indian nationalist WhatsApp groups. This incident is being viewed within the context of alleged Indian state transnational repression targeting the Khalistan movement in Canada and compared to the BB incidents in India. The incident follows previous anti-Sikh incidents in Canada and recent calls for violence against Khalistanis from Hindutva influencer Girav Arya. Dasmash Darbar Gurdwara, where Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was assassinated in 2023, frequently spoke, also reportedly experienced a similar disturbance 2 weeks prior. Local Sikh groups are mobilizing, calling for vigilance, and a new grassroots alliance has been announced. Meanwhile, in India, a violent attack on a Sikh-owned business has prompted global condemnation. On March the 2nd, in Uttarakhand, and I probably said that wrong, but I apologize if I did, a mob attacked a Sikh-owned store, smashing windows, forcibly removing turbans, and dragging the owners from the premises. Business owner Ranjit Singh reported that the attack was instigated by a local Congress Party councillor attempting to extort money. He also stated a female staff member was targeted for sexual abuse and a gold chain was stolen. 3 men issued a video apology claiming that it was over a parking dispute, and they were later arrested. Councillor Verpal and 2 others were also named in a police FIR, or First Information Report, with Virpal filing a counter-complaint. Gianni Ragbir Singh, head of the Act, condemned the attack as an anti-Sikh hate crime, drawing parallels to the 1984 Sikh genocide. The Shiromani Gurdwara Parbandhak Committee, or the SGPC, has demanded action. Tensions are also rising in the UK, where Hindutva figure Gaurav Arya has called for violence against Sikhs. Arya called for Hindus in the UK to fund London mafia groups to attack Sikhs who support Khalistan, following a protest against Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Janshkar. He accused the UK Labour government of orchestrating an attack on Jashankar despite no physical attack occurring. He also made claims that Hindu places of worship be attacked and that Hindus should buy guns. UK MP Bob Blackman and government faith advisor Colin Bloom echoed Indian nationalist claims. Lord Rami Ranger also threatened violence towards UK Sikhs. And in Canada, the Liberal Party is facing criticism for their handling of the anti-Sikh threats made by a candidate. The Liberal Party of Canada faces calls to remove Viresh Bansal as a candidate in Oshawa, Ontario, due to anti-Sikh threats on social media. His tweet also included threats of violence against Conservative Party Deputy Leader Tim Upal. The World Sikh Organization condemned his hate-filled tweets. Bansal also made homophobic remarks and called Sikh Canadians trash people. The Liberal Party and Bansal offered apologies but did not withdraw his candidacy. It should be noted that the Liberal Party did suspend his candidacy or his involvement, but they have not yet dismissed him or demanded his resignation. Sikh groups are now awaiting further action from the Liberal Party. This is not the first time the party has been accused of ignoring anti-Sikh hate, and we will continue to follow these developing stories and bring you the latest in future episodes. Thanks for tuning in to Perspectives here on Satellite TV. I am James Cousineau in the studios in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. So as we can see, it's a big issue that is taking just different turns all over, between the violence against the store owner in India, and then with the Gurdwara here, and then threats of violence in the UK. It is something that needs to be addressed by the international community as well as local communities. And I know that here in Surrey, there is an increase in the way that they are offering security around the different Gurdwaras, and as well for the community as a whole. It has been very strongly encouraged that if anyone feels unsafe or feels that they are being threatened, whether it is by anybody, whether it is the Hindutva or just somebody on the street, if you're feeling threatened, call the police. One thing that has definitely increased in Canada when it comes to law enforcement is the training that's been going on with the RCMP and CSIS to local agencies. They are giving a lot more information, training, and resources in order to combat the foreign interference and transnational repression. So don't be, if you're in Canada or elsewhere, don't be afraid to contact the police. I know that some people come from areas where there's a lot of corruption in law enforcement, but at the same time, here in Canada, the police are there to help, and they are willing, and they are going through extra training to make sure that they can help deal with this serious issue of transnational repression and the violence that's going on at the hands of the Hindutva, Angus.
Yes, indeed, and we often report on these Hindutva attacks wherever they occur, and they do take many forms, and they've become increasingly clever, I would say, over the years. How they form these attacks. They're leveraging things like social media. They're leveraging all these platforms and areas, academia, law enforcement, as I say, online through social media. They leverage all these outlets to increase these attacks on the Sikh community. As As I say, they adopt very intelligent tactics. They've learned over the years what works and what doesn't, and so they refine their tactics to increase their power and leverage over the Sikh community. Tactics include things like increasing their influence, whether politically, socially, through social media or whatever, but they've got this enormous Hindutva army online to influence public opinion. They send out a huge amount of misinformation, which is the next tactic. They use misinformation to smear and stain the Sikh community, to turn people against the Sikh community by spreading fake news, fake information, misinformation. Another huge tactic they use. Another tactic is using false flag, and this is where they blame Sikhs for things ranging from simple graffiti on mandirs, as we've seen in Australia, for example, that turned out, as the police discovered, they were false flag attacks by the Hindu extremists themselves to try and blame the Sikh community, all the way up to large-scale false flag incidents like the Air India bombing in Canada, which is likely, the evidence points to the fact that was a Hindutva or certainly an RSS extremist false flag incident, terrorist attack, to again blame the Sikh community. Another word that came up there highlights one of the other tactics they use: provoke. This guy who was arrested claimed it was under mental illness that caused him to attack the Sikh community. In fact, actually, as it came out very quietly, he was encouraged to provoke the Sikh community, because again, this is a classic tactic of Hindutva, and we saw it in the Brampton riots recently. This deliberate tactic, when you get Sikh peaceful protesters, for example, protesting outside the mandirs very peacefully and quietly, but completely democratically, they were deliberately provoked. And they're only human beings. They are men filled with angry testosterone and passion about their cause. It doesn't take a lot to provoke a man to react violently. All you'd have to do is prod him violently, and he's just going to react through human nature. And that is exactly what they did. Provoke these guys. The Hindutva extremists went out there. They deliberately provoked the Khalistan protesters and the Sikh protesters outside, who reacted angrily. Of course they would. And one of the guys was then videoed wielding his flag as a weapon. Now that video was cherry-picked as a prime example. He was provoked into reacting, and that section of his reaction was then selected and spread around social media to say, look how violent these Sikhs are and these Khalistanis are. That is a classic tactic of them, and smearing and staining the community at every availability, every opportunity, whether again it's through academia, whether it's through misinformation, whether it's political, whether it's through social media. Again, the aim is to smear the reputation of the Sikh community, is to turn people against the Sikh community. So that's all the tactics that they use. It's on the increase. Now, the one good news about there is always a silver lining to things like this. Why is it increasing? This actually, ironically, is good news. It means Hindutva are getting extremely desperate. They are getting increasingly desperate. So they are reverting to increasingly desperate tactics, because they realise the Khalistan movement is winning. The argument is being won. By adopting these peaceful democratic tactics, the Khalistan movement is winning this battle. It is winning the war for Khalistan. India realises, Hindutva realises that they're winning. They realise that Khalistan is now increasingly inevitable, so their tactics are increasing in desperation. This is why we are probably seeing an increase in it, because they need somehow to try and regain the initiative, to try and stamp down and bury the Khalistan movement, but they are fighting a losing battle. The big question is why? Why are RSS and Hindutva increasing these attacks? Well, firstly, because they realise and recognise that the Khalistan movement is winning the argument. Secondly, and we'll talk about this in the comments, is they have had this traditional hatred of the Sikh community. Why? Well, we talk about this on most shows. It is basically because the Sikh community, firstly, stand up for, as principally and philosophically, stand up against injustice. They stand up for the human rights of minorities. They stand up for fairness. They stand up for all that is good in humanity. Ultimately, the Hindu extremists, RSS, do not stand for that. They stand for the complete polar opposite. They perpetuate the caste system because it keeps the ruling Brahmanical caste in control of India, in control of the 95% of the rest of the Indian population. The Sikh community recognise this. The first guru recognised this. All the gurus recognise this. And all the way through the development and evolution and establishment of the Sikh religion, they recognise the Brahmanical control of India, the caste system and its evils. And they have stood against it. They have tried to highlight to people, ordinary people, you are kept in this prison of the caste system. You need to stop it, break it down. That is why the Sikh community are targeted by Hindutva, because the Sikh community are an existential threat to the caste system, to the Brahmanical controllers, the rulers, the ruling elite of India. That answers the question why this is happening, James. So yes, thank you, James, for that. Interesting, fascinating to see this increase in Hindutva attacks on the community.
Yeah, and for those viewers who are not familiar with the Sikh culture or are learning along with us about it, I just thought I'd point out quickly here a couple of things about the Sikh beliefs and their system, and that is that they believe in one God who is formless, timeless, and omnipresent, equality of all humanity, which is so important and such a huge, valuable asset. Wishing that all communities could find this, and that is that they strongly emphasize the equality of all people, regardless of caste, creed, gender, or social status, or religious beliefs even. That it's an honest living. Sikhs are expected to earn their living through honest means and hard work. And we know that by looking at the community and how hard they work and how well they develop their community, but also everything around them. To the remembrance of God, the meditation and remembrance of God's name are essential practices for Sikhs. Selfless service, of course, we know about that. Serving others without expecting anything in return is a fundamental principle. That Sikhs are encouraged to share their resources and blessings with those in need. And we know that as well, Angus. We've seen that time and time again, the examples of the Sikh community giving and just selflessly. Sikhs consider the Guru Granth Sahib to be their living guru and the ultimate spiritual authority, and Sikhism rejects empty rituals, superstitions, and idol worship. And just in the closing of that, the 5 thieves is what they refer to, the things that they try to overcome. And that is lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego. So again, these are very important to the culture. And that is what people are fighting against. When they're fighting against the Sikhs, they are fighting against the caste system. They are fighting against equality. They are fighting against the humanity. And, and that's why I think that the Sikhs will win in the end, because they are the side of good. And, when you look at that, again, we need for the different communities to stand up for the Sikhs and to make sure that we protect them as they protect others in the community. And with that said, of course, we know that J.D. Vance has just announced that he and his wife will be heading over to India for some bilateral conversations with their counterparts there. And, oh, there we go. My screen blanked out on me. I didn't know if I lost you, but we are still here, Angus. So that's great. So some of the things that we can assume, because they haven't really released a lot of detail as to what the itinerary or what the topics of conversation will be with J.D. Vance and his wife Usha. And the last trip they had, he went to France and Germany, and he kind of got a little, we'll say, aggressive in his conversations there to the group. So hopefully he tones that down a bit and really has some real successful meetings. Now, we expect that they'll talk trade, and that is to enhance U.S. exports to India and address tariff concerns, aligning with President Trump's emphasis on addressing trade imbalances. We assume that security cooperation will be deepening defense ties, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. And India is a critical counterweight to China, but I hope that it goes further than that. And they talk about security in other nations as it relates to our common theme of transnational repression and foreign interference. When it comes to technology partnerships, collaboration in AI and nuclear energy, building on Vance's attendance at the AI Action Summit in Paris, but also on the previous agreements where they've been working to advance the nuclear program for India as well when it comes to energy. Personal and cultural ties. Of course, Usha Vance's Indian heritage adds a personal dimension with potential symbolic gestures or engagements with the Indian diaspora, and we'll see how that plays out as well. Hopeful outcomes are enhanced bilateral relations. Of course, we know that. And the previous meetings and even in the past administration for Trump, they had a fairly good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. So we'll see if that carries forward and how that plays out with new tariffs and everything else that's going on. Trade agreements, we expect that they will move towards a more balanced trade relationship. And we know a lot of it will be about strengthening military, and that will be talking jets and other munitions and other technology that they can bring to India, and what India can do to help to bring that along in terms of maybe having new manufacturing plants or assembly plants there that have to do with military and strategy there. Energy and tech deals. Of course, we know that energy is a big conversation for a lot of countries right now, and India-US relationship is no different, that they will be talking about those things, Angus. And we'll see how the new U.S. policy goes and where it gets them in terms of the new talks or advancing the previous talks.
Indeed, and I'll talk in a moment in more detail about the trade imbalance and the trade discussions that they will no doubt be entering into in great detail. But yes, as we often say, James, the India. US-India-West relationship is absolutely vital for the coming decades. We often talk about the geopolitics of that region. And of course, the big worry for the West and perhaps even the global community is the rise of China. China is a totalitarian regime. It is increasingly belligerent. It is a future superpower. It is one of the largest economies in the world now. And it has definite aspirations and ambitions, including not least with Taiwan, which is potentially the next flashpoint for World War III, God forbid. So yes, it's absolutely vital that India is brought in alignment and on side as an ally with the West, because of course India sits effectively as a neighbour to China. If India aligns more with Russia and China, as it seems to be doing so to some degree, that creates an enormous problem for the West. And this is why the West are bending over backwards to try and get India on side, to try and seduce India away from these totalitarian communist regimes of Russia and China back into a more democratic regime, which unfortunately Modi seems to be failing at every turn. But ultimately, dollars talk, and even China has been seduced by the great dollar as it clings on to communism. But capitalism is certainly turning over China's social infrastructure on a daily basis. So even India is finding itself, despite whatever intentions it may have, it still needs dollars, and it still is seduced by the great dollar and capitalism. And this is why I think Trump and his administration, and of course the rest of the Western governments, are using trade as the great tool to seduce India away from China and Russia, to say, look, life could be better. We can make your country wealthier, more powerful, richer, if you align with democratic principles and you come and work with us. You come and ally with us. And ultimately, India gains, but really the overall geopolitical argument is we need you to work with us to try and stand up to China, because China ultimately is the great threat, the great danger for the future, James. And this is why I think Vance, in his trip there, obviously with the endorsement of Trump, is going there essentially to get India on side at whatever cost it takes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because a lot of the sticking points for India when it's come historically to do with technology and to do with military is that they wanted to own the rights, the intellectual property, the all of that. They wanted to maintain full ownership of. So we'll have to see how it plays out between the U.S. and the India government when it comes to any technological advances and how that technology is shared and the rights or the IP, the intellectual property, is maintained.
Indeed, and which actually neatly brings me on to my first story, and this is to look at this trade policy and the trade situation in more detail, and why the Trump administration and generally speaking the West actually are concerned about India, and why there is this enormous trade imbalance. It's about $45.7 billion trade imbalance between the US and India. And Trump is desperate to do something about this, saying, look, India is gaining out of this. India is using its own powers and privileges to ensure that this trade deficit continues to India's benefit. And Trump, being Trump, said, no, we need a more level playing field. We do need to level this. We do need to have a more fairer situation so that US exporters can export into India as much as India is exporting into the United States. So the latest trade policy agenda and annual report that's been written for the President of the United States sets out in many pages, and I won't go into too much detail, but I'll quickly summarise the key points that this policy and this agenda has raised, and it raises the issues, the problems that exist. The first one, of course, is what it calls unfair price support practices. This is a pretty typical tactic. India's methods for reporting market support for things like rice, wheat, sugar, etc. are deliberately kept as unclear. And it means that it helps Indian producers at the expense of fair international competition. And so what the US is saying, look, we need more transparency. You can't hide your market methods for reporting pricing and market infrastructures. If you're hiding it, it means we can't compete fairly on a level playing field. So you've got to be more transparency about how the pricing of goods within India is supported by the government or otherwise. What it calls public stockholding programs. India keeps large government-held stockpiles of key agricultural products. Again, this is a very typical tactic, because what this means is the government can deliberately then it's the old supply and demand situation. If prices drop, it can increase prices by withholding supply. The government can hold back supply so it increases prices, or vice versa. If the price is getting too high, it can drop pricing by increasing the supply. If the government are holding stocks, it can basically manipulate market pricing, which basically is a fundamental unfair trading mechanism. That's what India gets up to on a regular basis. The US, of course, is concerned by this, and it is hurting this trade relationship. Complicated certification and conformity assessments. Now, India has traditionally been known as an enormously bureaucratic nation. This is a bit of a legacy of the British Empire, and it's increased it basically put bureaucracy on steroids. Now, it has this confusing testing and certification situation, and this, unsurprisingly, slows down exports and it adds costs. And what it essentially does is create barriers for US products entering the Indian market. So the US is saying, look, we've got to simplify these to ensure that we have a level playing field. Customs and trade facilitation issues. Now, there is a problem about fair competition. India has outdated and I would almost say deliberately overly complex custom procedures, which therefore delays shipments, and of course it then adds costs to import. If the US wants to import goods, it hits this enormous barrier of certification, of regulation, of bureaucracy, and that increases costs, which in turn has to increase the price of the US goods. And again, this is why US goods are struggling to get into the Indian market. So again, the US is saying, no, we need to promote fairer competition in this respect. There are gaps in IP, intellectual property, and regulatory reforms. Now, India, very much like China, I've had first-hand experience of this myself when I tried to work in China. I have worked extensively in China. There is a danger, a recognised danger in China, that IP, intellectual property, is stolen by China, by Chinese companies. If you are a Western exporter into China, they look at what you're selling and they steal it. And they create it and stick their own badge on it, and they sell it as their own. So it is, in effect, stealing IP. And this is a worry that the US and the West have with India. India's not quite as bad as China. but it still does have problems with it. And this is what the US is saying, is we need greater protections for IP, for manufacturers, for producers of goods and services in the US. We need greater protection for IP and for innovation, because without it, it deters innovation and it does harm industries and it does prevent US exporters from exporting into the Indian market. And finally, they need broad policy challenges and fair trade. Trade policies are not fully reciprocal, and again, this is unsurprisingly, but this is very typical of India. And the US government is saying, look, the policies are not reciprocal. In other words, what we do for you, you are not doing for us. The US stance is about protecting its industries and ensuring that trade is balanced and fair. And likewise, we do know that Modi has adopted a very much isolationist stance about Indian manufacturing and service provision. And this has been to the exclusion of international companies who would like to export into the Indian market, but his isolationist policies has prevented this. He's saying it's all very well and good for Indian companies to export their goods, as we often report, whether it's pharmaceuticals or whatever, to the United States and around the world. But Modi is saying, no, we don't want you to export your goods into India. We will manufacture that ourselves. Well, fine, but that is not making you any international friends. So the US is saying, look, if you want to work with us, if you want to sell goods into the into the US market without tariffs, this is all about tariffs, don't forget, then you need to have a more level playing field. You need to allow American companies to export and to sell their goods and services into the Indian market. You let us do that, we will let you do that in the United States market. So those are the key points, James. That's what it's all about. It's all about level the playing field between the United States and India. And I think Narendra Modi will have no choice but to do this if he really wants to. And I have no doubt that he does want to make friends with the Trump administration.
But one of the ironies in that whole thing, Angus, is that when you look at the policy and the agenda, they have really delayed and dragged their heels when it comes to testing imports to make sure that they meet this quality standards, so-called quality standards. But they have no problem with the quality of the precursors for the drug trade that they are exporting, and the fake fentanyl that they are manufacturing right there in Delhi and exporting to the world. So, you know, where is the quality or the regulation when it comes to this sort of activity? So it shows that they can do it. They just choose not to, in order to be able to dump certain things in the market and hold back others to really protect themselves and the pricing.
Absolutely, and I have absolutely no doubt that Modi's government will relent on a lot of these things. I think they really do want to grow the Indian economy. The Indian economy, as reported, is struggling in many areas. It is very polarised. The billionaires and the wealthier are, as we said the other day, and the BBC reported, the wealthier are getting wealthier. But the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, are struggling. They are disappearing. And they are the genuine engine. They are the real engine of any economy. And Modi, I think, needs, and I think he recognises he does need to do something about this. But to do that, he also needs foreign investment, and that foreign investment can only come if he does relent to Trump and his requirements as set out in this agenda. So let's stay with the US, James, and we're going to change subjects, but it does come back to a subject that we talk a lot about on the show, and that is illegal immigration, particularly in the United States. And the Indian diaspora, the illegal diaspora. Of course, there is a very large legal diaspora, but there is an increasingly large illegal diaspora spreading out of India. And one of their target nations is, of course, the United States, which Trump has stood up to in recent weeks and has been deporting and sending back many of these tens of thousands of these Indian, mainly men, back to India. Now, recently, just a few days ago, a Californian Indian national has been charged and sentenced to prison for his scheme to smuggle Indian citizens into the United States. Yes, he's been caught, as has many others, of people trafficking. He's been trafficking Indian citizens illegally into the United States. Now, this happened in California. He was a Santa Rosa resident, but he is actually a citizen of India. And he's been sentenced in Seattle to 6 months for conspiracy to bring in and transport certain aliens for profit. Now, his name, Sushil Kumar, is 35 years old, and 3 others have been indicted in connection with this scheme to smuggle Indians across the northern border for profit. Now, the group was connected to 2 smuggling episodes a couple of years ago, and the judge noted that those smuggled into the country are vulnerable. As they said, that they wanted to be in the country doesn't mean that they were not exploited, because each was charged $5,000 to $10,000 each, which is months or years of their salary, and essentially coming from India, where the cost of living is so cheap. $5,000 to $10,000 is an absolutely enormous sum of money. And of course, these smugglers, these evil guys, have been exploiting these vulnerable people who are desperate to get to the US and charging them basically a fortune to do this. Human smuggling undermines our country's ability, the United States this is, to regulate the border at a real cost, the judge said. Now, the 2 smuggling events involved 8 different citizens of India. A motion-activated camera caught multiple people jumping a fence near Washington. Border Patrol agents near the apartment saw 5 people run to a white minivan. The vehicle was stopped by Border Patrol. 5 citizens of India were in the van with California resident Bobby Joe Green as the driver. So there's a local US indigenous guy there helping them. When questioned, 3 of the non-citizens told the agents that they saw Mr. Kumar at Peace Art Park prior to crossing the border illegally. 2 of the non-citizens stated that they communicated with him via WhatsApp, so clearly he was well and truly implicated in this. Now, the investigation revealed that Kumar and his 26-year-old Rajat directed the non-citizens on where and how to cross the border. Rajat paid Green to transport the non-citizens from the border. Now, Rajat asked for monetary payments from the Indians for being smuggled into the US, etc., etc. Prosecutors wrote to the court, smuggling of non-citizens is a dangerous scheme that profits from exploiting vulnerable individuals while undermining the United States' ability to regulate its borders, exposing our nation to potential security threats. Mr. Kumar admits that he knowingly and intentionally conspired to smuggle and transport non-citizens with no lawful right to enter or remain in the US, and that he engaged in these acts for his own financial gains. He'll be sentenced in April. So the case was brought by the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security Investigations. That's the ICE teams and US Border Patrol. So James, this again is a story of human tragedy. We talk a lot about it. We talked about it a couple of days ago. These guys are the most vulnerable parts of Indian society. They are poor. They are desperate. They make these enormous, dangerous journeys at huge risk from India to try and get into the United States. And it is people like this guy who's just been charged and is about to be sentenced. It is these people who are the real evils, the real evil minds behind these, because they are exploiting, they are charging these people an absolute fortune. And after they undertake these desperately dangerous journeys into the United States, and they are trying to make money off these vulnerable people. And of course, the US is the loser in this as well, because the US, the borders are finding thousands of these vulnerable men being smuggled across, illegally inserted into the United States population. And there, of course, they struggle to make a living. They find themselves actually living in poverty in the United States. Again, they are life's losers. This is terrible. This is why Trump is so desperate to stop this. Firstly, to stamp down on these evil people traffickers, and secondly, to help these young vulnerable men who actually should not be in the United States, because they are even in the US they are being exploited, James. It is a story of human tragedy.
It is, Angus, and it's something that we've touched on so many times in terms of the losses of life of people trying to make that journey, the people who have lost their life savings, they've sold their property, they've sold their homes, just to try to get that part of the American dream. And it comes up empty for them. They end up getting caught. They get sent back to, in this case, India, and they have nothing left. I mean, the desperation that it creates, beyond the desperation that caused them to make that journey in the first place. And these people are feeding off of that desperation. They are exploiting these people. And as we covered last week, where there were the family, the mother, the father, or the two adults anyway, and the two toddlers that were even dressed for the cold. So they're going both north and south across this Canadian border for this incident here. I mean, that's only 5 minutes down the road from where I live, and I'm right by the Peace Arch border crossing, and it is an issue. But what do we do about it? Well, we have one of the issues, of course, that Trump keeps raising is the fact that the border is not secured. And that is both sides. We have an open border in Canada, the longest one in the world, and we have to crack down on the smugglers. And that's where it really lies, to crack down on the people that are just taking advantage and abusing and exploiting these people, Angus.
Indeed, a terrible, terrible story, but Trump is clearly very much on it. Right, James, let's move on to our comments section. Loads of great comments. Thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience for your input in the comments section. We'll start off today with one of our more prevalent commenters, Danny. He's really been putting the hours in the comments section with some very extensive comments. But I picked one that he did say, just part of one. He said, look, India surrounded by sea. What's special about Punjab's water? Well, this is a huge topic, and we too talk about this on a regular basis. Many of our podcasts, we talk about Punjab's water. Maybe Danny doesn't realise the significance of Punjab's water. Of course, Punjab, the state of 5 rivers, even Satluj, our very own namesake, Satluj River, is an enormously significant river. Why is Punjab's water so special? Because water it's a gift of life. Water provides life. Water is a thing that feeds the enormous agricultural breadbasket of India, which is the Punjab. Punjab's water has become really an area of massive political battles. It is an area that has actually, in fact, spawned, ironically, the Khalistan movement, because it was the riparian rights, these rights over the water, as they're called, riparian rights, the rivers, the rights over the rivers. It's the riparian rights that even Bindranvali back in the 1980s was saying, look, we must have more autonomy, we must have more rights over our water in the Punjab, because the Indian central government have been taking our water to feed downstream, feeding Maharashtra, feeding Gujarat, all these other states, but you're taking it away from our own agricultural needs. We can't grow our crops. We're flooded in the monsoon season, but in the dry season, we're not even allowed to take water from our own rivers to feed our own crops. And we are the breadbasket of India, so you're damaging the breadbasket of India. So all in all, and I do urge you to watch some of our podcasts where we talk about riparian rights. So Danny, yes, what's special about Punjab's water? It is the most fundamental, important part of Punjab, and it is actually, as I said, it is one of the main pillars of the arguments for Khalistan, because Khalistan wants its rights over its own water, over its own rivers. James.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's also not forget that they bring up the India is surrounded by a sea. Well, go take a mouthful of the sea and let me know how it tastes as opposed to fresh water. Exactly. I mean, the salt water, it would have to be desalinated, and that is just not an option when it comes to crops and when it comes to consumption and potable water. So again, it is about that fresh water. It's about the control. It's about the ability to water the farms and to grow the crops. And yeah, the seawater is just not beneficial for that, Angus.
Indeed, and even going back to, we're talking about Bindranvali, it was the Anandpur Resolution, I think back in the 70s, that's how far back it goes. The Anandpur Resolution, one of the key tenets, so one of the key demands in the Anandpur Resolution, which is the Sikh community request to Indira Gandhi, who refused, who threw it back in their face. But the Anandpur Resolution said we must have access to our own water, we must be able to have these rights to irrigate our own crops from our own rivers, which again was rejected by Indira Gandhi. But it does interesting, James, bring us on to, you talking about the sea, it does interestingly bring us on to this next comment from John Cayley about the boundaries of Khalistan. The Khalistan map should be from, China, from Ladakh in the north, all the way down to the Indian Ocean of Gujarat. The question, where is the Khalistan boundary? What is Khalistan? And even Danny does say, why don't you start with Sikh capital Lahore then, over in West Punjab in Pakistan? Because of course Lahore was part of the original Sikh Empire. It was part of the Punjab before partition. And the question is raised validly by both Danny and John Cayley. Look, what are actually the boundaries of Khalistan? Well, if we follow the old Sikh empire, it would be enormous. It would stretch into past the northwest frontier into Afghanistan. It was actually stretched down to Delhi itself in India. But it would ideally stretch down to Gujarat and the Indian Ocean, because how important would it be if Khalistan could have access to the Indian Ocean for strategic, obvious reasons, but also for reasons of import-export, etc., for trade. But in reality, also when we talked about the Pakistan argument regularly, would it include West Punjab in the Pakistan? In reality, Khalistan, as great as the Khalistan movement's ambitions are, and as much as they would love to include all the way up to Ladakh, down to Gujarat and the Indian Ocean, and indeed across to Delhi, I think that is probably an aspiration too far. In reality, the current Punjab, plus a little bit more of the surrounding areas, I think is a realistic option, and that in reality, I think is the most achievable first stepping stone, James.
Absolutely, and it's like we go back and forth with people all the time when they're talking about, why doesn't the Khalistan movement go after Khalistan in Pakistan? But it's about what is achievable. It's about, you don't swallow the elephant in one bite. You got to just take it one bite at a time, and that's no different here. So it's about really looking at what's realistic and what's achievable, Angus.
Indeed, and realistically, and we follow the democratic argument. Unfortunately now, West Punjab in Pakistan Punjab is primarily Islamic, I believe, anyway. Well, it is, I know it is. So if a referendum was held there, it's unlikely, I suspect, that the Muslims in Punjab, Pakistan would say, yes, we want to go independent as part of Khalistan. Maybe wrong, who knows, maybe they should hold a referendum there, we don't know. But that in reality is probably why Pakistan Punjab would not be part of Khalistan, but India Punjab would vote for independence. Right, a long comment from...
For the record, we don't have elephants in Canada, and I sure don't have one on the barbecue, so...
Indeed. Right, we have a long comment from Free Spirit, but it really does come back to what we've talked a lot about, and this is the politics of the Punjab. The one thing that baffles Free Spirit: why does the Delhi government have anything to do with the SGPC elections? Well, and you say the Brits didn't do it, but the Hindus, and then you go on at length about why are the Hindus trying to dictate to the Sikh community how they run their affairs. Sikhs don't interfere in the Hindu community. They don't tell the Hindus not to build their Ram Mandir based on a blatant lie that centuries ago there used to be a Hindu Mandir, or interfere in other matters that are a concern to Hindus. So why don't the Hindus keep their noses out of the Sikh affairs? Well, I would say, Free Spirit, this is really, well, firstly, politically, as we often say, the RSS has deliberately infiltrated to take control of things like the Shiromani Akali Dal, which was originally set up by the Sikh community to represent their voice politically. They originally had the Panth, they had their own democratic infrastructure, but they realised within the British Empire at the time that they had to engage politically within the prevailing British Empire political system, which is why they set up the Shiromani Akali Dal, the SAD. But since then, the SAD has been infiltrated by the RSS, because the RSS realised we must prevent the Sikhs from having a voice, so they infiltrated the SAD. The SAD in turn controls the SGPC in recent times through the Bedell families we've talked a lot about. The SGPC is important. It was set up by the British under the Gurdwaras Act in 1925, but the SGPC was then set up to control the Gurdwaras. Likewise, the RSS have decided we need to infiltrate the SGPC as well, so they've infiltrated that. Why? Again, I even talked about this at the beginning of the show, because they see the Sikhs as an existential threat to the RSS, and by extension, the Brahmins, the upper caste, the ruling elite of India. They see the Sikhs as a threat to their control. That is why they have infiltrated and interfered with the Sikh community and the Sikh organisations like the SGPC, etc. So I hope that answers your question. And Sikhs don't interfere reciprocally, because that's not what Sikhs do. The Sikh philosophy is to treat everybody as equals, is to make Hindus as better Hindus, to make Christians better Christians, make Muslims better Muslims, but not to convert them to Sikhi. It is to treat them as equals and respect their right to practice their own religion. And then you finalise your comment saying, it's time that the Sikh community kicks out raw agents and Hindutva politicians. Absolutely right, it is. Totally right, that's what they're trying to do, and that is why they're trying to wrestle back control, firstly, of the Akal Takht, the highest seat of power in the Punjab, and the highest seat of religious power for the religion of Sikhi. And that is why they are wrestling back control, and ultimately that is why they're fighting for Khalistan, because they want total and absolute control and sovereignty over the Sikh community, over their own community and their own affairs. That's what it's all about, James.
Absolutely, and I don't think that I can add anything more to that, Angus. I think you've brought up all the points that need to be brought up in that.
So thank you, Free Spirit, for your question. Thank you for your comment, and I do hope that answers that to some degree. Hooray! Critics Caller returns with just a small bleat from SS, who says, we're back to the same old, James. Khalistan is not Indians, nor they're true Sikhs. Well, first of all, you're right, they're not true Indians. They're not Indians. They are Khalistanis. They are independent by definition. That is what Khalistan is all about. Khalistan are not Indians. Nor are they true Sikhs. Well, there's a big question that I'm sure our audience will have an answer to. They are pimps, puppets of Pakistan. It's that whole argument that the whole Khalistan movement is a creation of Pakistan. No, it's not. It really isn't. We say this on a regular basis. Every time this same old argument comes up, they are nothing to do with ISI. They're nothing to do with Pakistan. They are not a creation of Pakistan. They are creation of the history of the Sikh community, the culture, the heritage, the enormous heritage of the Sikh empire that now has funneled its way through into modern times as the Khalistan movement. Its roots are not Pakistan. Its roots are from the original Sikh empire. Ranjit Singh is one of the pioneers of the Sikh empire. His genes remain within the Sikh community even today. His genes still stand within the Khalistan movement. It is all about an independent sovereign nation. And you say they're in bed with the killers of the Sikh gurus. The Mughals torture them. Well, I think you're letting out that you are in fact a right-wing Indian here, because of course there is this obsessive hatred of Islam, this obsessive hatred of the Muslims. And that is what comes out of your comment. The Mughals tortured them. Yes, they may well have done, but an awful lot of evil happened in those times. And then the final comment, these Khalistanis didn't protect Sikh girls. Now, I will take objection to this. These Khalistanis did not protect Sikh girls who were raped and exploited in the Rotherham sex scandal by Pakistan Muslim men. Actually, unfortunately, your facts are deeply and utterly incorrect here. It was the Sikh community in the north of England and the Midlands that highlighted to the British government, to British police, what was going on. Before anybody else, it was the Sikh community who raised the fact that it was Muslim grooming gangs in Rotherham and other northern towns and cities that were grooming young girls, young Sikh girls, and it was the Sikh community who went to British law enforcement and said, look, what's happening? You have to stop this. And this was years before even anybody else realised it was going on. So unfortunately, SS, what's it? Thank you for your comment, but I'm afraid we must fundamentally disagree with many of your things, but we do appreciate your right to air them, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and we can go back to the different social media bots. We can go to these sweat rooms where the Hindutva are paying people to post stuff like this. So hey, I'll leave it up to the viewers to figure that one out. But by all means, it could be an actual person or it could be a bot. We don't know, but we report enough on either side that it's about the division and the anger they try to incite. And you know what? We love the Critics Corner. We love our viewers, and by all means, you've got every right to put things up there. But let's not try to divide and spread misinformation or out and outright lies on this. Let's keep it civil and honest.
Indeed, and I have absolutely no doubt, and I do know we have a good solid members of the audience from Birmingham, from London, certainly here in the UK, who I'm sure would take great exception to this comment about the fact that they weren't there protecting Sikh girls. I'm sure, please do let us know in the comments, some of our guys in the UK, I'm sure you got some comments to respond to that accusation, because I've met several of them and I do know how passionate they were about fighting this dreadful dreadful evil of these grooming gangs. So, but I do invite SS to respond. Please do come back in the comments. Let us know if you disagree with what we've said, and likewise to our critics and our other Hindutva audience out there. Get in the comments. Let us know what you think. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough, as we often say. So, and Free Spirit returns again, and actually this is a bit of a there's an awful lot of discussion actually in a lot of threads and a lot of quite sensible and very respectful conversations going on. Danny was heavily involved in a lot of these. Free Spirit was involved in a lot of these. I've just cherry picked a couple of comments because I thought these were very, very pertinent points. Free Spirit said, in and amongst many of these conversations, thanks for your response, Danny. You are right about infighting, and this was a very important point because Danny had raised, look, the Sikh community, why are you all infighting? This infighting is just all over the place. It's happening in the Punjab, and again, we talked a lot about it, about the SGPC and Shirmani Akali Dal. Indian agencies have been able to infiltrate every Sikh organisation, and a lot of what you call infighting is instigated by some outwardly Sikh-looking men who've sold out to the Indian state, these fake Sikhs, as we often talk about. And they are saboteurs, they are agents provocateurs. They are paid agents of Raw who are doing the dirty work of Hindutva. And that's what it's all about. And again, James, this is what we often highlight. It is these fake Sikhs, these people who are they are agents of Raw. They're agents of Hindutva and of the RSS, deliberately getting involved and infiltrating Sikh politics in the Punjab and, of course, externally in the diaspora, to cause mischief, to cause mayhem, to cause chaos, to get this end result, which is this infighting, which means that the Sikh voice is diluted and it's lost, James.
Absolutely, and it's not far off from the story that we talked about tonight with that Hindutva individual who was in the local Gurdwara here and causing chaos. So it's not a lot of different that way, where they get in and then they cause chaos. They want to create problems and division, and we see it, and that's another example, Angus.
Indeed, and Free Spirit signs off by saying, look, take heart. The day will come when all this comes to an end. It is visible on the horizon. You're absolutely right. And I will leave the final comment to Danny in tribute to his efforts in our comment section. And he rightly says the only way to end this constructively is that every Sikh gets educated, becomes a leader. And actually, you bang on there, Danny. This is what it's all about, this keyword education. This is why we're here, James, is it not? We are here to try and spread the good word, to educate our audience as best we can. Not that we are in the position to educate, I'd never be so presumptuous, but we are the conduit of information. We are the conduit of the truth, and we are more than happy, and we see it as a personal privilege to be able to, and almost it's a requirement, our own savour, our own selfless service, James. When you talk about selfless service, savour, it is our selfless service to at least try and pass on the truth, pass on the good message of Sikhi, to pass on what is actually happening, this misinformation, this evil campaign from RSS, but is also to stand up for the community. But as part of that, it is all about educating our audience, not just the Sikh community, but those outside the Sikh community, about what the Sikh community is all about, what the Khalistan movement is all about, what it represents, and why it is only a force for good, James.
Absolutely. And with that said, Angus, we would love for some of the viewers out there who are of non-Sikh background to let us know you're out there and watching. We would love to know if you are interacting with us. So yeah, let us know, because we know that we do get some non-Sikh people that want to learn with us and learn about Sikhi, learn about the heritage, learn about culture. And that's why we try to bring a variety of different stories to keep you informed and to raise awareness and educate others.
Indeed we do. That's what we're here for. That's what it's all about. But that does bring us conveniently to the end of Perspectives for another day. Please do keep those comments coming in. Thanks so much for all the comments. There have been some fantastic comments coming in, all appreciated. Do keep the educational comments coming in, all the questions if you have questions for us. Or indeed, as we said before, if you see some breaking news, do let us know about breaking news that we might have missed. Always very useful if we've got this army of people out there in our audience trawling the internet or trawling the real world to find out what is actually going on out there, because It is our job to bring you the truth. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if you'd like to let us know something just personally and individually you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching Perspectives for another day. That is it from me. It is a goodbye from me. It's a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.